Okay, so I can better get to know you. I have named place cards for everybody to use at their places, yes? Adrian, right at the top. These are alphabetical by first name. Alexander?
Yeah, there's.
Allison.
I think it might be
That was okay.
Probably.
Okay. Pass this down to them. Dylan. And please correct me if I mispronounce anybody's name. Emily. Erin. And if any of you want an alternate spelling corrected on the name card, and I'll reprint it the next time. Eugene.
No.
Eugene, not here. Okay. Faye, 4-5. Bree. Hannah. Just.
It's Hannah. It's not here.
Okay. Oh, June. Back row, please. Jacqueline. Jinyu. Did I get the pronunciation right? Kelsey. Mahim. Marina. Mahim. Did I get that wrong? Marina. Okay. Mary.
Mary Grace.
Nick. Okay, there you go. Rebecca.
That's me.
Thanks. Roberto. Rohit. Did I pronounce that right? Kelsey. Kelsey. Sanja. Did I pronounce right? Close. Sponson. Is that how it's pronounced? Stephen. Thanks. Taika. Did I pronounce that right? I'm probably gonna get this one wrong. Check.
Oh, that was right.
Oh,
You're
right.
like the only person that got that right. Wow.
Okay. And Uro. Becky, okay. So, I have a marker, hold on. Zion. Did I pronounce the name correctly? Who did not get a name card? Name?
Yeah, that's the roll today.
Faye. Okay. That? No. Oh. When did you roll?
Today.
Okay. I had this as of noon. So you did it after that? Okay. And your name?
Eugene.
Eugene. Thanks. I've got a blank card for you. Now, my goal is to learn everybody's name within the first few weeks, and we'll get you the magic marker too. But then we'll use the name cards for any guest speakers. Because it's important, I think, for them to be able to address you by name if we go back and forth in the discussion. Did I miss anybody now? Okay, good. Great. Welcome. This is the third time that I've taught this class, and I'm going to go through quite a bit on the background, structure of the class, expectations, and other sundry things. Plus, we'll get started on the first unit on strategy. So we'll have a couple of videos. We have an exercise where we're going to compare actually I'll put the agenda up. We'll compare 3 leaders in history, some excerpts from movies actually that depict the 3, and you'll have a chance in groups to react to the leadership style for those. I usually have 2 breaks in the class, and I will try to always end by 8:20, I think is the time we have to end by. So hopefully we'll hit it early today. These slides are in Canvas files, so usually within an hour of the class, I'll post the slides. If you want to download the slide deck and write notes on them as we go, please do so. In the bottom of every slide in the notes section are often links to sources and other things as well, so those may come in handy. Okay, introductions. So starting off with a little bit about me, I've got 40 years in IT, so I'm the practitioner on the faculty. Of those 40 years, 38 have been in IT management, and that's what we're teaching in this class and talking about in this class. Both on the for-profit side and on the nonprofit side. And I've been in the CIO role, Chief Information Officer role, for 17 years between Save the Children and the International Red Cross in Geneva. I'm also the co-founder and former chairman of NetHope, where I continue to serve as a leadership fellow. And you can find all sorts of additional things on LinkedIn, including articles that I've written and published there. And the reason I mention that is not to trump up my background, but to invite you to connect with me there. Since my mission is about making connections for good, part of that connections is connecting people with other people, and so connecting you with people in my network. And I'll be bringing the network of people into the class in terms of both guest speakers and mentors for the project team. We'll talk about that in a bit. So send me a LinkedIn invitation and get connected. I look at my career as a series of 5 chapters. So chapter 1 was on Wall Street. Chapter 2, I was a consulting partner in a small consulting firm. And then I was global CIO, which I've already mentioned. And then I've been at UMSI for 3 years in chapter 4. For the next chapter, I basically want to be on a vineyard and writing, which is what the file pertains to. So NetHope and Save the Children came in on my timeline at about there. The International Red Cross, this is Federation of Red Cross Red Crescent Societies, came in there. UMSI, the School of Information, and there, and today we're here. So I find this a useful way to think about my journey and where I've come from in terms of an IT career. But why all those chapters? What about those 5 chapters? So I read an author when I was 38 years old, Charles Handy, said we could expect to have 5 careers in our lifetime. So I started thinking in terms of the 5 careers, and that's how I came up with the 5 chapters that you saw in the prior slide. But for most of you, the US Labor Department estimates that you can expect to have 14 jobs by the time you're 38. So at 38, I was looking forward to maybe 5 careers, but you in fact may have quite a bit more variety. And you can watch this wonderful little video about it, which is a group of high school students and their teacher who for I think about 7 or 8 years did a video called Shift Happens, which you have to be careful how you say that, but talks about the things that are changing The changes in IT are affecting organizations and individuals. And they make this point here about the 14 jobs. Some expectations that I have, these are the same expectations that I would have for employees that were working for me, and I do for each of you as well. Your best work. You have respect for your team, and that means you each contribute to your team. And if you look at the syllabus, you'll see that there's actually an evaluation that's done by your peers anonymously at the end that determine what's called the effort rating. So respecting your team is part of that, putting in the time to work with the team and help the team. Taking ownership and learning from mistakes. Failure is not a popular concept, I think, here at the school among many people, but actually ends up being a rather useful experience, particularly if it can be reframed in terms of it being a learning opportunity as opposed to a failure. Critical thinking and debate. So I expect you to ask what I call ugly questions or poke in the eye questions. If I say something that just doesn't quite agree with you or that you want to challenge, my encouragement would be to challenge it. Because in a good Socratic fashion, truth and learning come out of the back and forth debate. So the one thing you'll find as a manager and an IT leader, the worst mistake you can make is hiring people like you. You'll never get the diversity of thought, the diversity of opinion. You'll never get the poke in the eye questions that a leader and manager need to have. And then think in terms of solutions. When I took a job at a new office in San Francisco, on day one, I was taking over from my predecessor, and the employees lined up outside my office door. And it was like, somebody that I knew from the office, what are they doing? And well, they're here, they want you to, solve their problems. And so they come in and say, I have this problem, and then they turn to leave. That's called dropping the problem or the hand grenade on the manager's desk and expecting that to be solved. And I'd hand it back, and I said, you haven't done your homework. Go back and think about what the options are. Think about the pros and cons of those options, then come back and we'll talk. And then it's a collaborative decision-making about solutions and options. You'll find that's a theme that's going to come back. In the surveys, thank you for all of you that answered the pre-course survey. If you haven't done that, there is still opportunity to do so, and it's important to do so because it determines how we'll set up the teams. I picked some random quotes out of what people were looking to get out of this class. Thank you for all your great comments on this. A better understanding of leading an IT team, and understanding more about business strategy, decision-making, better understand the role of IT and its organization within an institution, and to speak the language of stakeholders, particularly like this last one, learning to speak the language of stakeholders and get skills to one day manage a team. So understanding who your external and internal customers are, your clients are, and how to have a conversation, a dialogue with them. So these I heard as your expectations. And of course, there's a much longer list than this representative here, but I think this is some of the flavor of what I read. These are some things you can expect from me. This is in the syllabus. I'll just highlight a few points here, just the ones that are in blue. I hold myself accountable to coming prepared each class. For some of you who know me or have worked with me in other classes, you'll know that I typically have a rather long checklist of things that I go through before each class to make sure that everything is in order or present. I'm going to be available. I'm interruptible. You can drop in office hours, but you can also drop in or make appointments for any other time as well. I'm particularly comfortable with email, but I have probably every other communication application running on my system. So whatever you're comfortable with doing, you can reach out to me that way. I'll keep things in confidence. If it is something that is useful to be shared with the class, I'll ask you for permission first for doing so you can opt out of that or opt into it. And I'll treat class members fairly and try to accommodate individual needs. So I think a key another word I could have put in here is flexibility. If you're having difficulty with something or you want to go in a different direction, come and see me. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then I'm going to provide connections to my network, not only with the people you'll work with on the project teams, but anybody else that you want to connect to in my network. That's part of my mission, is to make those connections. There's some advantage of a small class, although this has ended up being a little bit larger than a small class. It's probably a medium-sized class. However, I think there's these benefits to having a smaller group. We can have more consulting time. We have a greater opportunity to get to know each other in the room. I'll get to know you better, and hopefully sooner. And then that means I'll be able to personally review and comment on most of the assignments. And then there'll be more opportunities for individual electives and independent study. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So what did the survey say? So of those responding, we had 29 people respond to the survey, and dominantly it's a school of information. We have LS&A, Ford, and Ross also represented. And then if we look at degree program, though, it's a bit more varied because, of course, we have different degree programs here at SI. So the BSI, MSI, and MHI are all SI degrees on this pie chart. And that represents the dominant of the whole. It's important, though, and we'll try to do this on our project teams, to get a mix of people with backgrounds, which is why I asked the questions in the pre-course survey. In most work environments, you're going to be assigned to a team that you don't get to pick. And usually it's people that may be in different time zones and in different countries. And you got to figure out how to make it work. So we're going to practice doing that in the class with the project teams. People who felt they had a strong degree of tech skills, so those would be the 4s and 5s here, either agree or strongly agree. That's 14 out of the 29 that responded. So it's about evenly split between the two. And those who had business or organization experience, a little bit more slanted towards the positive side, which is good. Typical also, I think, of master's students who have had some work experience before they come into the program. These two distributions, though, become important in terms of both balancing the teams, but also in terms of how I target the class. This is not going to be the most technically challenging class you'll ever take, and it's not going to be the most business challenging class you'll ever take, but it's going to walk a balance and in between. There's the word cloud on all of the questions and objectives that everybody wrote on the survey. The only thing I like about word clouds is, sort of the dominant words that jump out, organization skills, better, right in the middle. But I think the representative quotes that I put up earlier are a better indication. So, based on that survey, again, my other comment is if you haven't completed the survey, complete the survey. There's the link. The link is in as an assignment in Canvas, but it's also available in the slide deck. So please take the survey. Okay. Before I jump into this exercise, any questions? Okay. Let's break up into pairs, sort of 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 2 all the way around the room. And take some time to introduce yourself to each other. Find out something that's not on your partner's resume. All right? So, in past classes I've got pets and, vacations and things like that. But find out something that's not on the resume, something a bit more personal, maybe. 3 minutes, and then you switch. All right? And then we'll just take volunteers at the end to introduce or say what they learned about the other person, but that's only on a volunteer basis. All right? Pair up, go.
Did you guys get this over here? I think this is good. Okay, so.
And then how exactly to work other
What is something that's
it's usually like
and also yes, I do.
okay, so I think
Grew up in Maryland, that's where I met
Okay, let's switch to the other person.
yeah, then I continued passion. Qualifiers in March in South Africa. And it's here. You guys have it. It'll be at I barely remember, I barely remember. But like every time I see a picture, it's like right there. Okay, so what's your You say it's a very small town.
Okay, time. Hard to find out something unique in 20 minutes, huh? Volunteers to introduce who they met and what they found out? Yes, Mary.
So this is Uche. We actually were in a class together last semester, but I learned some fun new facts. He's from Maryland. He did his undergrad here as well as now he's in the master's program. Fun fact, he's on the gymnastics team, and he's represented Nigeria in national competitions and international competitions. He's trying to make the Olympic team.
Okay, great, welcome.
And,
You wanted- you
yeah,
wanted-
Miss Mary, and she went Mary Grace Burgundy, and she went to Italy for Christmas break because she has like family there, and she'll be working in Chicago at a digital consulting.
Great. Who else? Who'd you?
This is Aika.
Speak up.
This is Aika.
Hi.
I'll just make it short. Like the one interesting thing I found about her is that the career I had before coming to a graduate program was with Hyundai Motors. She actually did an intern with Hyundai Motors over the summer in Seoul. She plays piano.
And then I heard that, is this Hojun? Hojun, and he's from Seoul, so we kind of bonded about the summer heat, as I think you could attest to as well. And then I found out that he also lived in the Philippines and Kenya before moving to the US for undergrad, so.
Great, good. Welcome. Who else? Yes, Aaron.
Marina and I actually already knew each other pretty well, but I found out some interesting facts. The most important being that we have very different views on breakfast foods. She does not like eggs, and I do not like waffles or pancakes or crepes. So we
Wow.
disagree wholeheartedly on that.
So you're not going to have a breakfast meeting.
But actually, it's with multiple options.
Okay, good. Marina, you want to also?
Yeah, so this is Erin. Besides the whole breakfast food that we were conversing on, Erin had her birthday over break. Sounds like she had a really good time. Karaoke and stuff.
Okay, great. Just a couple more. Yes, Jacqueline.
This is Rebecca. She, I guess, is kind of from Ann Arbor. She came here when she was in the 8th grade. She's the one from Ford, Public Policy School, has a background with government and kind of like tech and tech stuff. She did Code for America in San Francisco back in 2013. She was just in Germany last week. Yeah, or for a week. I don't know exactly. Yeah. So she's kind of having the same kind of adjustment issues with coming back to totally English-speaking country.
Great.
This is Jacqueline. She just got back from doing Peace Corps in Ecuador for the last 2 years. So she is both having to deal with English and having to deal with winter layers. And before Peace Corps, she was an MSI student. She did Peace Corps in between, and before coming to Michigan, she did advertising for Disney in LA.
Great. Okay. Thank you. continue to learn about each other. I think you'll find it an interesting thing to do. Let's watch I'd like to show a video. It's actually a TED Talk. And Simon Sinek is the author. He wrote a book called First Ask Why. And I like this TED Talk because it frames this whole question about strategy, which is the first unit that we're going to be dealing with in the class. And then we can have a brief discussion afterwards. So let me just switch over here. So for those of you who've taken crisis informatics or read about crisis informatics, one of the key things that we practice and learn is everything has an A plan and a B plan. So, and if B doesn't work, then we improvise from there. Okay, what do you think about that? Did you catch his point about money? In the beginning, he said money is the byproduct of your goal, of your dream. It's not the goal. He said quite a few other things. In fact, I hear new quotes every time I listen to this because I jotted down that those who lead inspire us. He talked about products that inspire us. What did you think of the description he had of Apple Computer? Yes, very nice.
I think, a lot of the focus on sort of like the emotional over the rational aspects of leadership and strategy really stood out to me. And then talking about how Apple positions itself as basically appealing to values more than features, per se.
Right. So in the early days in Apple, IBM was the dominant computer manufacturer, and they had their keyword was think. They had think with an exclamation point everywhere, all over their organization. And what did Apple do? Think differently. And they also said the computer for the rest of us. So they were appealing to individuals who would become the owners of computers. So they shifted the discussion. But it became more of a cause and more of a why. That's what Simon is saying. That if you're missing that element of why, it's hard to inspire people to follow you. It's hard to inspire customers to come and buy your products or use your products. And so the first part of strategy is thinking about why. Why are we doing what we're doing? And you can think about these three questions. The last one is one that I'll give you as an unofficial homework assignment. You don't have to write anything, you don't have to turn anything in, but think about what's your educational why? So if you say it's to earn more money or to get a better job, that's a byproduct. What's behind that? What's the why? You don't need to answer that now, but I'd like you to think about that. Because that starts to get at what's my strategy as a person, and think about also what is the strategy of our organization when you're in a position of leadership in an organization. Can you see how technology might change in an organization if it moves from what to why? Actually, I'll reverse it the other way around. Yes,
well, the phrase, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right, okay, good. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about operations, and so, but we're not starting there. That'll be the second unit. Yes, Erin.
I feel like when you tell someone what to do, then it's often prescriptive, limit their creativity, and also take away some of their their own ability to guide their work and decide how things should be done and explore different ideas.
Good.
Which I feel like is less motivating to
Yeah.
kids, rather than just saying, here's the problem, let's solve it together.
We call this, one aspect of this is changing your you statements into I statements. So if a manager says, you need to do this, rather than to say, I have this problem, how might you go about it? Which is inviting them to participate in the problem solving, right? But it turns the lens from a you statement, because the reaction to a you statement is usually defensiveness, you know, or we make excuses, right? And sometimes as a manager, the things that you learn are different ways of asking questions, and asking more questions than making statements. Anything else? Yes, Rebecca.
I mean, just like generally speaking, if you have a reason why you're doing something, you'll most likely do it better. So like that video, my team went over that whole video, and it was to like get us to thinking like, why are we doing our sport? Like, what are you trying to get out of it? Like personally, what are your goals, stuff like that.
Good. Rebecca.
So one thing I was struck by in this video is in nonprofit management, we talk a lot about you should have a mission statement, but you should also have kind of your values. And here I feel like he's talking a lot about he's like aligning the two things, whereas like for me, kind of the mission statement is almost less important than the values, because the values are like, it felt like what he was talking about, whereas the mission statement for me is what matters for IT, because that is what lets you decide, like prioritize and think about like the direction your IT is going in.
I once asked the CIO of World Vision, one of the largest nonprofits in the U.S. You know, I said to him, so what do you tell the people in your IT department? He said, I tell them when we get IT right, more kids get fed. So that was his connection. Now, getting IT right is about an operational thing, but tying it to the why of the organization, which is to serve children through many of their programs, makes that mission connection. Yes.
I think that this move towards tying vision to work, I feel like you see it a lot, that it's more prominent in organizations now. Like if you think about Amazon, everything they do is quote unquote customer obsession, or like Microsoft talks about empowering people in organizations. So I think it's interesting to see organizations that traditionally in the past you wouldn't think of as being like inspiring, now adopting this moniker. And I wonder if there's almost a point where like every organization, even if it's kind of like boring and they're, you know, making a widget, wants to be like, we're changing the world through our widget. And like I wonder if there's ever a point of like oversaturation of that.
Yeah, that's a risk. How are you unique?
Because, you know, Amazon's web search, like Microsoft, you know, like sell you Microsoft Word, but like did it empower me? Like, I don't know, but it's helpful. So I think it's just kind of like a line of understanding that piece.
Right. Good. Good. Ben.
I'd like to know what he thinks about where Apple's gone in the last 5 years. Obviously, it was so many dated video, and Apple's changed a lot. Post Steve Jobs, where Tim Cook is now, and
Yeah.
I'd love to see an updated doghouse and stuff when he.
That's right. He did this video when Jobs was still at the helm.
MP3 players, and now all smartphones and stuff.
Right. We don't even think about MP3 players. It's a feature on your phone. That's right. Yes, Alex.
Doesn't it sort of ignore what I feel like has to be reality, that some folks just want a paycheck and want to go home at 5 and have meaning in their life extracted from other ways?
Yeah, some people, many people that I worked with said that the reason they work at their job is to earn money to do the other things that they really want to do. You know, that's one approach, you know, as well. I can tell you from experience that wears thin after a while. But you can certainly do that for a season, and that may be a good place to start. But at some point, you sort of ask the question, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard? What does it mean? The meaning question is getting at, the why question. And usually that question comes up when you reach the point of burnout. You're working so hard at the job, you're getting the next product release out to meet the deadlines and meet the cost constraints, you're putting in all of the extra hours, and you're burning out. You feel literally fried, from doing it. And then it's that question, why am I doing this? That starts to get at this. So pay attention for when that happens, when that occurs. And you might think back to this video maybe that's a time to ask the why question. Yeah, Adrian.
This is a little tangential, but kind of relates to that. Like when I was doing the what color is your parachute sort of thing, in job search, there's 4 different types of work. There's the job, where it's just I need to eat and put food on the table for my kids. And there's an occupation, which is something that you might have a uniform and you do day to day. And then there's a career where there's a trajectory, and usually pays more, but then there's the vocation, which I think is what they're trying to ultimately tap into, where it's a calling, and there's even that self-sacrificial sense to it.
Right. Vocation gets at it, I think. Why are we doing what we do? We'll come back to this diagram in future discussions on strategy. But one of the ways I talked about strategy in nonprofit organizations was by use of a pyramid diagram like this. And in most organizations, and Mary Grace has already pointed this out, you have a mission statement and you have values, and Rebecca, I think you were talking about this. And then below that there are objectives, and then below that there are tasks, that we need to do. And the why is in the mission and the value side. The how comes down more to the objectives, and then the what we're going to do is more of the tasks. If you ask your manager, why are we doing this? Why do I need to do this task? See how they answer that question. And hopefully they don't answer it like a parent would often answer it, which is because I said so, or because I'm the boss, type of thing. Hopefully organizations don't operate that way anymore. I'm afraid that some still do. But when we talk about strategy, we're in the upper part of this pyramid. And then when we talk about operations, which is our second unit, we'll be more at the next 2 levels. Questions, or we'll take a break? Or we'll do both.
Actually, can I just say, because the entire part about Martin Luther King is incredibly ahistorical and incredibly wrong. There was actually a huge apparatus getting people there. Martin Luther King was chosen very specifically by people who did run.
Yeah. I think both in terms of the Martin Luther King story and in the Wright Brothers story, he's oversimplifying to make his point. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out. All right. Sorry?
The TiVo part is pretty accurate.
Yeah. How many of you have heard of TiVo? Okay, a little more than half. But still, that technology disappeared, right? Yeah. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
So do we have examples?
There is a take-home final at the end, no midterm. There are 2 short papers. I'll talk about these.
Yeah, I noticed you have paper points accumulations and stuff.
Yeah, I'll go over this. It's all points based, right? So your grade is largely under your control. That's largely how it works in the work world.
Are there, I know you, but are there certain deadlines? Some things obviously have like certain timeframes when they're expected to be in, but if
Yes.
people are able to like get them in advance.
Yeah, that option, sure. Yeah, I've had some people that like to do, front load it because things get so busy at the end of the semester. And that's an option, sure. All right, let's get started again. So in terms of an overview of the course, so the flyer I sent around on this class and what's in the course description is this, I think, rather important quote from Peter Drucker, which really frames this first unit well, that management's doing things right, but leadership is doing the right things. And so when we talk about managing the IT organization, we also have to talk about leading the IT organization. And strategy is often about deciding what are the right things that you need to work on. If I had to boil down the course to one sentence, which is always a dangerous exercise, but this is the one sentence that I think sums it up, and that is to think strategically, operate efficiently, and engage personally. That could be the motto for the class, but that's also summarizes the 3 key units of the class. I'm going to start with a story. I'll probably tell a story in each class. I've already told one, but this one, my father was on the F-14 Tomcat design team. And if any of you have seen the old movie Top Gun, the plane that's featured in that movie is the F-14. And we had models of this and pictures of it at home after the top secret part of the assignment ended. And he told me about the young engineers who would come in fresh from school, and they were gung-ho to apply the latest technology, in the building of this new plane. And his advice to them was, don't worry about it. The plane will get built. What's important is learning to work together. And that speaks to teamwork, but it also speaks to the enterprise. That learning how to work together is what, at the end of the day, ends up being 80% of the task, in my estimation. If you give me a team who are technical experts and a team who are reasonably good at technology, but are excellent at conversation, I'll take the second team. Because they're the ones who will work well with the business leaders in the organization and have a greater chance of succeeding in their projects. The good news is these are things that can be learned and they're things that can be practiced. The mission for the course is these 3 parts. As I mentioned, that strategy is transformational. It's about going from where we are now to a destination. And by the way, every consulting project always has this as the core of the consulting project. What's the current state? What's the future state? And how are we going to get there? Every consulting presentation probably has that as the core to the presentation. Operations are more transactional. How are we going to increase the quality? How are we going to increase the efficiency of what it is that we do? This is a lot of the how that Simon was talking about. And then engaged people make things happen, or to use Sinek's word, inspired people make things happen, and that IT is personal. In the nonprofit world, the IT leaders, when we talked about what our mission was across our organizations, we said, we really believe IT matters. IT can make a difference. Technology can make a difference. And so that was the personal side of what it was we do. Or as I said earlier, the CIO at World Vision, Adam saying to me, when we get IT right, more kids get fed. He actually said the reverse of that. When we make an IT mistake, less kids get fed. And I said, you need to make that positive. Turn it around and say, when you get IT right, more kids get fed. These are the 3 key units that we'll be covering, and these are the classes that will be under each one of these 3 units. So this is what we'll be going through. You all got a link to the class plan, which is a very large Google sheet with many tabs in it. That's the operative document for this course. I'll link to that from things in Canvas, But if you want to find out what's happening next week and what's coming up, that's the document you want to look at. In terms of not only these 3 units, we're bookending it by doing an introductory session today, setting up strategy and leadership challenges. We'll do an exercise in a bit on leadership. And then we'll wrap up with some stuff on IT leadership, come back again, but we'll be doing presentations to a senior management team, that's SMT. These are real senior managers. I usually have a group of 4, a couple of CEOs, CIO, COO, and the teams will be doing presentations to these folks. And then about managing yourself. So we'll be doing a unit of career planning in the midst of this as well, and we'll do some practice interviews, but we'll be from 2 sides. You'll play manager, and then we'll flip it and you'll play candidate. So that because in the staffing unit, which is the 3rd unit here, one of the most important things you have to do as an IT manager or leader is hire for your team. How do you do that? What does the other side of that table look like for all of the places you've been interviewing and talking to, whether it's for internships or jobs that you have waiting for you? What if now you're on the other side of the table and you've got to make a selection among people? If I go back to the Drucker quote, there's a wonderful article in Inc. magazine that talks about 10 traits of a Drucker-like leader. I'm not going to read through all of these 10, just in terms of the red highlights. That's certainly the question of alignment is one that comes up in IT and IT management frequently. How are we aligned with the company's overall mission? As a manager, can you tell your people how they connect with the mission? How is it what their job does? How does that connect with the mission of the organization? A clear list of priorities. And that's somewhat of a triage list because you can't do all of the things that you think of or your team thinks of. So how do you determine what the most important things are that you're going to work on and what the things are that you're going to work on first? And how often do you revisit that list and look at it? Staff and promote, first by gaining clarity about what are we trying to do. Again, this is touching closely to the why, but so the question is, what are we trying to accomplish here in this IT department? Inviting dissent. So this is what I said earlier in terms of the poke in the eye question. If you hire people, for example, who only agree with you or who think like you, and will never ask you a challenging question, you have to be right all the time. I can tell you that's impossible. So you want people who are going to who raise questions and push back. And sometimes as a manager, you have to go around the room and say to your team, tell me why this won't work, and get everybody's opinion around the table. The critical question is not how can I achieve, but what can I contribute? And an executive leads by example. So one of the important lessons of leadership and of management is don't ask your people to do something you wouldn't do yourself. You can read the full article in Inc. magazine. I think it's a rather good one. Saint-Exupéry, I think, had a this is interesting. This is a paraphrase of what he actually wrote. But if you build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood. Don't assign them tasks and work, but teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. That's a wise statement. People are going to yearn for that goal, and the other things seem to fall into place. So why study leadership and management? Many of you have strong and growing technical backgrounds. Some of you will attain the highest IT management position. Currently, that's the CIO. That may change in the future. However, all of you will lead a project at some point. And being a project leader is the first step in management and leadership as well. you're all going to work with IT people, whether you're in the IT department or not in the IT department, and sometimes understanding how IT people think or IT managers think can be an asset in getting done what you need to get done. You'll all work for a manager and trying to figure out what's important to that manager and what does it mean to be a good follower, and I mean that in a positive way, not in a subservient way. And then all of you will practice influence management. I had an employee once who said to me, well, I can't be responsible for my performance this quarter, or this 6-month period I think we're doing. And I said, well, what percentage of your performance do you think over the last 6 months was due to you or due to just the environment around you? He said, oh, it's all the environment. I said, I think you may need to think a little bit more about this. Because her argument was, well, I don't have control. I can't control people in the organization to do things. And influence management is about how do you encourage people to do the things you need to get done for your project or otherwise with people that you don't have direct control over. And so influence management is a key part of that. I'll talk a little bit about situational leadership. This is largely Ken Blanchard and Hershey's work that was started in the late 60s. He wrote a very famous, well-sold book called The 1 Minute Manager and has made a fortune out of offering type of consulting. But one of I think he and Hershey's correct observations was that leadership and management goes through stages. That when somebody's new to a job, you have to be highly directive. You're telling them, exactly how to get started, what they need to learn first, what they need to work on. And then as they get experience, you're coaching them. You might want to, try this differently or whatever. And then supporting. So how do you think that went? That looked really good. That was interesting. And then finally delegating. I have this problem here. Do you think you can work on this or solve this? Right? And over time, the amount of directiveness goes down. It starts off as highly directive and then becomes less directive. And so this type of pattern is a fairly good one. We're going to somewhat mirror this in the class. We're going to start off with some highly specified assignments. And then in the end, when we have the prompts for the senior management team presentations, are rather succinct and short, and it's up to you and the team to do some research and talk about how that can be more complete. The good news about this is that anybody that's in a directive management, if you're early in an organization, you say, okay, fine, I'm learning, right? Once I figure this out and I'm learning though, and if your manager still is very directive, then what do you say? I'm being micromanaged. This is, I don't like being micromanaged. I'm being told how to brush my teeth in the morning. This is ridiculous. And we all want to be in that position where we get to decide how it is we're going to go about solving the problem. And maybe even also coming back and saying, here's what I think the problem is. And that requires trust and freedom. Trust on the manager's part, the organization's part, and then the freedom to do what it is that you want to do is a part of that. So it's an interesting trade-off, being told exactly what to do versus being encouraged to come up with solutions. In the long term, we end up feeling better about this. We may be nervous if we're not getting enough direction at the beginning, but in the long term, we feel better when we have more trust and freedom. So the assignments are going to evolve, as I said. It's going to mirror the real world organization because leadership means handling ambiguity, and handling ambiguity is often how do we make sense out of what we have in front of us, and how can we break it down, how can we structure it in a way that we can proceed and make progress on it without being told how to do it. And sometimes that requires improvising as well. And the strategies that you develop in doing those types of things, I guarantee you will be important. One of the #1 things mentioned by, we did some research where John King and I worked on a consulting class for BSI students last semester, and we interviewed consulting organizations. And one of the things that came up again and again is that we need people who can handle ambiguity, especially client ambiguity. And if you do work for clients, you know, if you were part of an IT team or otherwise, and you have a group of clients that you're serving, you often have to make sense out of what it is they're asking for. Because I can tell you they don't know how to give you the perfect specification. Perfect specification does not exist. You have to fill in gaps. You have to elicit conversation and comments from them. And so the strategies of doing that, and we'll practice some of that in the class, will be particularly useful in your future work. These are the learning objectives that are in the syllabus. I'm not going to review these in detail now. I already mentioned that there's going to be mentors. There's going to be a proposal for the senior management team. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And the fact that we're going to touch on human resources and how does one assess emerging technologies if you're running an IT department, for example. These are the primary texts. Probably the one that I've liked more and more is the Phoenix Project. Has anybody read the Phoenix Project before? A couple people, 3. Okay, good. You'll have an easy time. You may still want to go through it. The Being Geek, has anybody read Being Geek before? So that's written more from an IT shop perspective. I also think it's got quite a bit of wisdom in it. Be the Business, Martha Heller, I'm hoping we'll get her to be a guest speaker. She has been, for 25 years, runs an IT management recruiting firm. And so she wrote a book after talking to CIOs over a 1-year period. She's also an editor on CIO Magazine, wrote this book called Be the Business. I put this in on sort of on the side because it's on the reading list, but I'm going to probably pick a few case studies from it. As an example is Mark Settle. We will read an article by Mark Settle, but he's been an IT practitioner, as I've been for years, and wrote a book called Truth from the Trenches, which was the practical guide to the art of management. We'll refer to him from time to time. Probably you don't have to go and buy this book. I'll make PDF scans of the stuff we're going to read and put it in Canvas. The other books are available through Merlin in the library. Everybody knows about how to access those. And they're also available as ebooks as well if you want your own copy. So those are the primary. The other components, so the typical class is going to have a lecture, a guest speaker. That guest speaker may be a guest video like we did with Simon Sinek, question answers, reading summaries I'll talk about in a minute, discussions, team exercise, we'll do one coming up. Videos, stories, and next steps, and that's probably the components because it's impossible. There's no way and no way you should tolerate a 3-hour lecture. It's just not going to happen. And usually in the work environment, be it for-profit or non-profit organizations, one of your challenges is, okay, if I'm having an all-hands meeting for half a day, how am I going to break it up and keep it interesting? If you're just going to have, 1 or 2 people, you'll be the talking heads in the front, you'll lose everybody. Everybody will sleep. Most classes have a video and a story to supplement the readings. Why? Well, we tend to remember the stories. It has both a visual and an auditory quality to them as well. Field trip. So this year, I'm adding a field trip. I'm hoping we can work out the details of this, but we want to take a tour of one of the University of Michigan's large data centers and talk to their operations manager as well. So we'll get to see a real operation. And we'll see how close we can get to it. They're nervous about the security, which I absolutely don't blame them. The team projects. So when we won't assign teams until after the course drop deadline. And then we'll finalize the teams, and then we'll draw from I have a collection of 20 mentors. We'll draw mentor names out of a hat. And each team will be assigned, usually these are senior IT people, who will be on a call with you weekly or bi-weekly. You have to work out that schedule. Some of them are in other countries overseas, and you've got to figure out how to make that work as well. But I can tell you that the mentors love this activity and they're committed to it. And some students have formed really good connections with mentors that are useful for future career planning as well. Solving a real world IT problem, so each of the problem prompts, I think there are 9 of them, will be real world IT problems for the group to solve, but there's also an option to pick your own. So if your team says none of these prompts appeal to me, fine, propose another one that you all want to work on. And then you've got to make a presentation to a senior management team at the end. We will do practice presentations, so this is not something you have to do cold. We'll do a practice on it. There'll be feedback provided. And then the goal of a senior management team presentation is not to reach a good conclusion. The goal is to make the ask and have them say yes. All right? And so we'll practice doing that, because I will guarantee you, no matter what career you go forward in, you're going to have to present to some senior management group or otherwise to get your project approved, to get it funded, to get it staffed. And so better to practice it here where you won't get fired. And it's an important skill to practice. Unfortunately, I think in the university environment, we learn how to write good papers, make good presentations with good conclusions. And I'll tell you that in the working world, that's not enough. You have to think about what's the ask, what commitment and decision am I going for on this, and have I gotten that? Have I heard and gotten that decision at the end? So we'll spend some time practicing that. Mentors, as I said, I'll probably have 7 lined up. Usually it's from at least 4 countries. Between 6 and 9 guest speakers. This is all dependent on when people's availability is, as I already mentioned, Martha Heller. I've already gotten a commitment from Jean-Louis Echohard, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at NetHope. Will be speaking from his home in New Zealand, so that's an interesting time zone to manage. That will happen on the 23rd of January. And as these dates get firmed up with different speakers, they'll be in the class plan. Grading. So I'm using a form of gamification. It's worked reasonably well for the last 3 years, so I'm going to continue with it. Although I will say that each year I make adjustments and changes based on the feedback from the classes. Points and accumulating points are the name of the game. So that supports student choice and autonomy, because you get to pick which elective things you want to work on. And it also reinforces delivering results and resilience as well. How do you get an A in this class? Accumulate enough points. You can get an A by doing just the required things, but you have to do really well on each of the required things. So that's why there's 10 elective projects, and one of those 10 is you pick your own. So the bottom line is there are many paths to an A, and I'll show you how that worked out in the last class. This is the table that's in the class plan on how do you accumulate. So basically, if you get 4174 points, you get the A+. This is the grading distribution. So if you look at all the assignments that are in the class plan, 60%, these 3 wedges here, which are the 2 short papers, the senior management team project presentation and documents, and the final take-home exam, that's 60% of the grade, those 3. So if you prioritize what the assignments are, that's where you have the biggest bang for the buck. I should mention an important footnote. You don't get to substitute an elective for a required item. You have to do all the required items, and then you can supplement with the extra credits. So here's the required items. You'll notice that on both the required and on the electives, there is a resubmit option. The majority of them are yes, some of them are no. And a resubmit option means if you're not happy with the points you got on that assignment, you can respond to the comments and questions that I or the instructional aide have made on them, and then resubmit it and get it regraded. And that's mirrors again, I think, the way that organizations work, and that is that, we learn by iterating. We get things done by iterating, so there's an iterative option in the assignments. Again, see the class plan for the details on these. There's a rubric behind each one of these that'll be in a shared Google Docs folder. And here are the extra credits. So for example, if you choose to summarize the readings for a week and you present that in class, you get double credit. You get credit for doing the presentation on the summary, which is less than a 10-minute presentation, and you get credit for that month's reading summaries as well. So that's a good item. Video clips, so you'll notice I'm using lots of video clips throughout the semester. One of the assignments is, find and pick video clips that you think would be relevant to the class topics, and you can get 100 points if you pick 5 of those, and so on. I won't go over these in detail. I did, based on student feedback, I moved one of the interviews, I moved up to the requirements, which is interviewing a CIO for their IT strategy and write up the key takeaways. Now, many of the mentors will be CIOs, so you'll have people that you can contact, but I also provide you a complete list of CIOs who I've worked with before, so they'll be available. You can also, there are a number of CIOs here on campus as well, so you can do those types of interviews. The interview assignments are pretty simple. You come up with a list of questions, you submit the list of questions. I might make some comments and say you might want to ask this and this as well. You then go have the interview, you write up the interview, and then you say what's the 3x3 summary. I'll talk about what that is in a second. And that's it, you're done. 10 electives in the class plan, which means that there are many opportunities. The electives add up to 2,100 points. So there's many opportunities to increase your score. I will say though, to get an A+, you're probably going to need to do electives. And I'll show you why in a minute. The other thing is that you can customize your learning experience. So if you want to take a deeper dive in a particular area that you're interested in, there's an independent study paper. I've had a few students that have done a paper in an area that they're interested in, and I think it's worth 400 points. So that's another option. And then there are health-related options sprinkled throughout the syllabus for those that are public health. Prior grades. So this should be a good news chart for anybody because nobody in the class worries about grades, right? There has not been in the last class, the lowest grade, if you consider it a low grade, was an incomplete, and that person ended up getting an A when they finished the work during the summer. But the rest were all A's and A+. That's all based on picking electives. So A+ students typically do rounding up for electives. A students on average do 3, and the incomplete student do 3 electives as well. So the reason I'm telling you this up front is plan to do electives. And pick ones that you think are interesting and doable, and if you don't see anything on the list you like, propose something and come back, okay? My office hours 3:30 to 5 Monday and Friday, and by appointment almost any other time. And I'm happy to do that face-to-face, do that on Hangouts or anything else. The instructional aide is going to be Brie Crowder. She was the instructional aide for my class last semester, and she took this class last year. So she'll be a good source for. So what the hell does he really want on this assignment? She's a good person to ask that question. You can also ask me, obviously. Laptops, so my feeling is there are some professors who say no laptops in class, no phones in class. Well, when I attend meetings, I take notes on a laptop, or I take notes on the phone, and so I'm not going to expect you to do something different than I would do myself. But I would say, think about context. So if you're in a project meeting, and you're sitting around the table and you're interviewing somebody for the project around the table, a notebook sometimes is viewed as less intrusive, or writing on a piece of paper. What I often do in a context like that is I write on a piece of paper, I go back to my office and take a photo of the paper I wrote on, and I dump it into Evernote, and then I've got my digital copy. So just pay attention to context. And the one exception is if there's a guest speaker that's in the room, laptops and phones down as respect for the person who's guest speaker. These are the electives again. I don't have the miscellaneous one on here, which is I use as a bucket to catch anything else that might be proposed on these. How's this course different? Well, it's from a practitioner's perspective, as you probably figured out already. It's working with IT leaders through the mentors, the guest speakers, and the senior management team. It's going to involve some discovery and some improvisation, as in any project. When we talk about projects, you'll hear me say something that 50% of what you need to know to successfully complete a project, you only find out during the project. So discovery is a part of the project. It involves selling your ideas to a senior management team. That's not as hard as it sounds. And there's an article I wrote that sort of walks you through the process. I've been talking about 3x3 method. What in the world is the 3x3 method? From those of you who have taken my class before, you know. But it's an opportunity to practice summarizing. Summarizing content for presentations, summarizing content for senior managers. And it's really an important skill to gain, to find that bottom line. And a quick story, one of our senior management team participants, Kevin McRitchie, he'll probably come and address the class as well. He went to his CEO. CEO said, I need you to summarize what your plan is for the next year. He said, okay. And he really worked hard to summarize it down to 6 slides. And he went to the CEO and he said, here's 6 slides. And the CEO said, okay, that's good. Can you do it in 3? He said, 3 slides. He goes back and he cuts it down and he gets it into 3 slides and he goes back. And he said, all right, that's pretty good. You did it in 3. Now can you do it in 1? At which point Kevin threw his arms up and says, what do you mean get it down to 1? I'm going to lose like half of the most important information on this. And he said, no, you misunderstand. He said, if everybody in the organization could make their presentation or their request on 1 slide, we can make more decisions every week. And if we make more decisions, we're going to move faster as an organization. That's somewhat counterintuitive to what we learn in school. Now, I will say it's really important to do your homework, but the next step is, can you boil that down? Can you reduce it down? It's hard to do, but we'll practice doing it each month. And it's important both for-profit and non-profit. Senior executives, they don't have the time for the details. They want to know what the bottom line is. So what you'll do is 2 slides. On 1 slide, your top 3 takeaways. The next slide, your top 3 critical questions that you would recommend that senior manager ask. And then minimum 20-point fonts. And they're 8.5 by 11 slides. So you have to reduce down. Why? Well, that importance of finding the bottom line. When you present to a senior management team, the operative phrase is please be brief. It's not that they have short attention spans, although some senior managers do have short attention spans. It's that they need to get to the bottom line and make a decision. It's all decision driven. And your job is to help them make the decision, to help lead them to the decision that they need to make and that you want them to make. The Working Backwards blog post tells you that in detail about how to work from the ask backwards and what types of things you should cover in an ideal senior management presentation. And then there's another blog post on finding the bottom line that I wrote when I was a judge for the Microsoft Imagine Cup. Okay, So, Cisco has a saying that I've taken to heart, which is eating your own dog food. So if Cisco develops a product, they've got to use it internally. That's their rule. That's what they mean by eating their own dog food. So I've just proposed this product of a 3x3 summary. So I'm going to now take that and apply it to the Carr article that I asked you to read for today. Nicholas Carr wrote a very famous now article called IT Doesn't Matter, and generated all sorts of response and back to him, and sort of, the three takeaways is that IT is following the adoption curve like a utility, and therefore it no longer offers a competitive advantage, and as a result, organizations should be spending less on IT and waiting longer to purchase until prices come down, essentially. That's my read of Carr's article. You can also include page numbers or references if you're doing the three summaries. Now the questions, so where on the IT stack is Carr talking? What's his focus there? If infrastructure is a commodity, well, what about business applications? What about consumer applications? Isn't that elsewhere on the IT stack, and does it apply equally? Is strategic limited to the unique? He goes and defines strategic as being unique. What about mashups and operational excellence? There may be, in fact, a unique method or a new method with older technology. And is IT a utility, or is it a way of doing business? Is it increasingly, as organizations talk about digital transformation, is it a way of doing business? And the digital enterprise as such is more fundamental than the IT department. Let me stop the discussion. So, what do you think about those questions?
I guess for number 3, I wish that companies would look at IT as utility. And
You wish that
I wish they would. Having worked in IT for a fair amount of years myself, I hate the fact that I have to call 5 different people to make sure there's actually internet running through the jack that I'm opening to plug it in.
Yeah.
I had to call utility or DTE.
DTE, yeah.
To make sure that I had internet or electricity out of one particular outlet.
Yeah.
No one would ever want to do that ever, but we have to do it. We see this way working through internet and through IT as an organization, and it's the most maddening thing on the planet. When you look at a thing that should give you internet and it doesn't.
Okay, good. Other comments?
Can you go back to the takeaway?
Yeah.
The third point, so usually companies have like an obsolescence policy, and they try to renew equipment and technology every 4 or 5 years. It has to do with fiscal policies and stuff.
Yeah.
And the value that the equipment loses over time.
Yeah.
And if they keep technology for too long, it means that they're losing money somehow.
They're falling behind. So you remember in Sinek's talk when he drew that bell-shaped curve? He called it, I'm going to cover this next week, but he called about the innovation diffusion curve, and that, it's the old bell-shaped curve where you have the, 2%, 14%, 34, 34, 14 to 2, right? Did I do that right? And so these are the laggards. These are the, I would call these the pioneers. He called them something else. But an IT department, a key question an IT department asks is, when do you jump on the new technology? Now, he pointed out, Sinek, and he's right, that here, in this place, IT costs the most. And so Carr's saying, well, if you wait till you get here, the cost of each system or each capability goes down. but the trade-off is, do you risk becoming a laggard, which I think is what you're pointing out, right? And so, how do you time? And do you time all things the same? So Ben was talking about an internet connection. An internet connection is fundamental IT. Providing internet connection to each desktop in an organization, that's what we call keep the lights on IT. It's a fundamental layer. I'll show you in the. So the way I looked at IT was as keeping the lights on type stuff you have to do. And then there's the operational that helps an organization run. So like the finance system, for example, very important in an organization. The sales system, et cetera, typically are operational. In a nonprofit organization, programs are about improving program delivery out to the field, and then beneficiaries or the end customer is at the leading edge. And our strategy was to try to move the IT department to do more at the top, do less at the bottom, and then move the IT agenda up to becoming more efficient. And so things like an internet connection, where is that on here? The bottom, right here. Internet connections here. Telephones, mobile phones, laptops, they're all down here. Right? A customer application that the customer uses directly to do business with the organization. Where is that? Probably near the top, yeah. So, whoops. So the question is, where's CAR focusing in Zara? Yes?
I have a question, not an answer. Could there be an argument be made to say that like the type of laptop, for example, could move you up this continuum? Because if you're looking at like cutting edge laptop technology versus, so I feel like that's the way a lot of organizations look at it, like do better use, et cetera. Or is that always foundational?
The goal in foundational, as we'll talk more about, is becoming more efficient. So getting the next laptop that may be faster, you may be able to do more with it, so it increases productivity, efficiency. But it's still down here. Is a newest laptop going to move the mission of the organization forward? Probably not.
Depends on who's getting the laptop and why. Does everyone get the same laptop? Do the interns get that same laptop? Like, I get a really awesome laptop on her internship. It was like really amazing. I was so jealous because we all had to bring our own laptops, and like it was like a serious gaming style laptop, and that tells you a lot about what kind of organization the type was working for at the time, and the kind of organization I was working for when I started to get a laptop. I really had internet connection, but it's all about who's working for and who's the beneficiary, right?
Yeah, in an IT organization, if this is not working well, it's real hard to do the other stuff. And that's why this is shaped like this is foundational stuff. But a key question is, should you be doing internally in an IT organization this, or should you be using partners to do these things? So for cloud, for example, cloud is a decision to take basic server capability, storage and operational servers, and move it out of a data center into a partner's, a vendor's location, right? It's still a foundational technology, but we're getting out of that business by partnering with organizations whose business it is to do those things. So more and more organizations, as they try to become more strategic and more mission-driven, need to get out and reduce these. I did a survey which shows that about 80% of the IT budget is spent on these two. So that's the other challenge. How can you free up more money to invest in the other things? We'll talk about that when we get to our finance unit. There's a question over here. Yes, Rebecca.
I had a question about, one thing I was really confused by in the piece was it felt like he was saying to just spend less money on IT, but
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like spending less money on like buying like TiVos for all your interns and like more on like figuring out how to like actually get people to use the like basic technology that you're providing them or something.
Yeah, and that's, you know, you're getting exactly at the operative question, is which technology? So Carr is, one of the errors I think that he's making is he's talking about IT as if it's one, you know, uniform whole. It's not. So then if we say, so what parts of IT lend itself? Well, it's probably the ones that are more like utilities, more like electricity, like an internet connection. If anything is closest to, you know, an electrical connection, it's probably an internet connection, right? So asking that question, where? So if Nicholas Carr was in the room, I'd ask him, so where are you talking on this? This is one way of looking at an IT stack. There are other ways. Where are you talking? Yes.
There's probably an element of differentiation amongst industries, as well as then I think some people have alluded to like the skill in order to use it. So like, you know, different industries may need different levels of sophistication for what they need. Like what is baseline technology that you need within your industry, and then kind of I feel like that sets basically a bar of then what advanced looks like. That makes sense. Like in some organizations it may be that it is really routine of like distribute laptops and have internet because the organization doesn't need to be that sophisticated per se, but then other organizations may be looking at like machine learning models, and so that could like help them be an innovator within their industry. And so I feel like if you just think about it, it's just like treating, I think oversimplifying the IT environment can kind of lose its potency if you're not looking at kind of what your industry is.
Yeah. If you're Amazon Web Services, AWS, where's your focus? Here, right? They want to be the best possible virtual server service and other things as well here. So the mission of that organization is to be the best you can possibly be at this level. But what about organizations who are not in that business? Historically, many organizations had IT departments and when we see the data center here, you'll see racks of servers. You know, and a good question to ask is, why isn't that on the cloud? You know, sometimes there are very good reasons. You know, very high security. You would not expect the Department of Defense to put their stuff on AWS. Although there was a recent contract that would argue otherwise. Okay? So understanding what the mission of the organization or the why of the organization becomes then important about how you're viewing IT strategy. And you know what stuff you need to get out of versus what stuff you need to get into. Because I can tell you that no IT department has enough budget to do all of these things 100%.
Amazon might. Amazon might.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen anything really exciting on the top of the pyramid out of Amazon, but and I wouldn't even consider Alexa up there. Okay, we can either take a break or press on. You want to take another 5-minute break? It's up to you. Yes? 5-minute break. All right, let's get started. So we're going to watch 3 video clips. Total time is going to be less than 12 minutes. And we're going to break up into groups of 4. So coalesce around 3 or 4, and you want to be taking notes as we go. So we'll do the post-it notes in the second step. So when we look at these video clips, so what you start to ask what's in common among them, what's different, what did you like and what did you not like, which are what these 4 flip charts are up here. Just take notes in your groups. And then we'll transfer those notes onto Post-its and put those up on the wall here. So the first one is a scene from the movie Invictus. Who has seen Invictus movie? One? Oh wow, okay. Great movie. And Matt Damon is in the scene with Morgan Freeman, who plays Mandela. Just to set it up, Matt Damon is the coach of the rugby team, and Mandela has asked the rugby team to host the Global Rugby Championship in South Africa to try to bring the country together. This is soon after Mandela had become the president in South Africa. So an incredible story, a true story. The second one is also a true story, is from the movie The Darkest Hour. It's Churchill's famous Never Surrender speech Winston Churchill made at the beginning of World War II. And the third one is Meryl Streep, which I think she won an Academy Award for this. She plays Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady. And it's a cabinet meeting scene where she's obviously the leader manager over her cabinet. Okay, so we're going to watch these three in succession, and then we'll discuss them. And so think of this in brainstorming mode, which is like anything goes, all right? And then you can decide which of the things you want to actually put up on the board. You don't have to put everything up. We'll do it in 2 steps. I'm going to turn on the closed caption though, because it probably gets about 75 to 80% right, and where it's sometimes hard to understand what's being said, particularly over the accents, it might help in the understanding. Okay, but now let's. Okay. 3 slightly different videos. Three different leaders. So, in your groups, one idea per Post-it note. What's in common? What was different? What did you like? What did you not like? If you notice you've got something the same as somebody else, just tag your note to the bottom of theirs, okay? So 3 more minutes to put up Post-it notes. Okay, we ready for the next step? All right, so individually, you have 6 dots, 12 dots rather, 12 dots. So in each category, you can put 3 dots on the one that you think you agree with the most, or is most important, or stand out. So you're gonna vote on what's the most prominent for you, okay? Individually.
Can we split our stickers?
Can you do what?
Can we do?
Tear them in half? No. You can put 2 on one though, or 3 on one if you feel that strongly about it. Sure, absolutely.
So we have to read each sticky note and.
Yeah. This, by the way, is one of the most common corporate exercises.
Yeah, me too.
If there are duplicate ideas, should we move them
You
together?
can put them together, yeah. Just attach one to the bottom of the other. All right. So this is actually a methodology that's useful in strategy. We're using it for leadership. But in strategy, you try to generate as many ideas as you can. And then you do something like the dots exercise, where people sort of have a limited number of dots that they can build out things. And then you see what has the top dots. And it's probably for a large group to reach consensus on an idea, it becomes a method of doing that. So for strategy exercises, this is something that a consulting group would typically do in an organization. Did anybody find that they were influenced by the number of dots that were already up? Yeah. There is the social side of this as well. Why isn't this an app? Why isn't this an app?
Sometimes it feels like it's a somewhat simple task. It could be over designing or something.
Could be over design, okay. What else? Yes, Tom?
I think that, like, the action of getting up and standing near things and reading them and talking about them with other people is part of the exercise.
And overhearing, as well. Right. So the socializing part that happens physically becomes something that's hard to duplicate. In an app, spending your discretion. Okay. Anybody else have a comment on that? So the number one thing for in common was everyone had a different strategy to get the people on the same side. All right, that makes sense. What was number one over here was, I think, this one. What was different, personal versus collective appeal. That's right. This is the Mandela and Francois one-on-one. Churchill was certainly a group, and so was Margaret Thatcher. On likes, mission-driven Churchill and Mandela were more likable. So the mission-driven played a role. Not a big surprise there. And then don't like, only negative leader was portrayed by a woman. Ooh. The other two were men. Yeah. So here's a challenge or an invitation. If you find a movie clip that you think would be a good example of a woman in a leadership role that could be used in the exercise, send me a note. You'll get credit for it on the video recommendations, and it's definitely something I'd want to include. Who would you like to work for? If you had a choice of the three people, who would you like to work for?
Mandela.
Mandela. How many would say Mandela? Maybe half. How many Churchill? Thatcher? All right, we got a two Margaret Thatcher fans. Okay, good. Okay. She was very effective. Okay, that's it. So as you're thinking about, and we go into the more of the leadership, and then we're talking about staffing as well. And so in thinking about being a manager, what qualities do you want to take from these three different examples, and what qualities would you like to avoid? One thing else I should think about at home, don't do it here, is to which one asked questions?
Does they all?
I think so. Thatcher asked you the timetable. That was the one question she asked, right? Mandela asked a bunch of questions in the beginning. Churchill he may have had a rhetorical question in the speech, but as I recall, the speech was pretty much he wanted to rally the opinion. That was a different. So they each had they had a common goal of trying to get across their strategy of the goal, but they also had different tactics. So these are the things to take home and think about. What does it say about our expectations that we have leaders? Who would we like to work for? And we already discussed this question of why it isn't an app. The next step, so Canvas isn't published, assignments. The feedback I got from students is they didn't want all the assignments at once. So I've taken the practice of releasing a month's worth at a time. If you want to front load your work and get more work done in the beginning of the semester, send me a note and let me know, and I will open up more. But people said they didn't like being overwhelmed by all the assignments all at once, it appeared. The class plan, I've said it again and again and again. Even in the syllabus, I took the weekly schedule out of the syllabus and put a link to the class plan, because the class plan is the operative document. And the reason is that it sometimes changes. So if there's some new current event, some new article that's published or study that looks interesting for the class, I'll include that. I may substitute for something else. A guest speaker's availability, I may substitute or change, so that there's some flexibility in the plan. It's easier to do that with the Google Sheet. No assignment for next week. There are 4 readings and a video to watch, but I don't think it's an overwhelming amount of things. And I need a volunteer who's willing to do the summary of the readings, the 3x3 summaries for next week, and we'll iterate through that. So, yes.
Oh, volunteer.
Dylan, okay, great, super, thank you.
And sorry, just to clarify, for the 3x3, it's 2 slides for each of the readings?
Yes. Yeah, we won't get to the, how would you do 1 slide on,
Yeah.
on 4 things? Yes, that'd be a little hard. We will change it mid-semester to make it a even, more focused down, but for now it's 3x3 on each reading. Okay? I'm sorry we ran over time. I will work harder to make sure we're on time next week. Thank you all very much.